Question 1. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of underreporting of export volumes by a specific department, which, if true, would grant that department a significant competitive advantage by circumventing established trade quotas and potentially evading certain duties. As a junior analyst in the Academy for Foreign Trade, you have identified this anomaly. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Ignore the discrepancy, assuming it is a minor error that will be corrected by the department itself. Option B. Attempt to discreetly adjust the monitoring system's parameters to reflect a more accurate, albeit lower, volume to avoid further scrutiny. Option C. Directly confront the head of the department responsible for the underreporting to demand an explanation. Option D. Immediately report the observed discrepancy to the head of the compliance department and the relevant supervisory authority within the Academy. Correct answer is D. Immediately report the observed discrepancy to the head of the compliance department and the relevant supervisory authority within the Academy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to secure a competitive advantage and the obligation to adhere to ethical principles and the specific regulatory framework governing foreign trade operations within the Russian Federation. The pressure to achieve targets, coupled with the potential for significant personal gain, can create a temptation to overlook or misinterpret regulations. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation, ensuring that all actions align with legal requirements and ethical standards. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the observed discrepancy to the appropriate internal compliance department or supervisory body within the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade. This action is justified by the fundamental principles of transparency, accountability, and adherence to the law, which are paramount in foreign trade. Specifically, Russian Federation laws concerning foreign economic activity and internal regulations of the Academy mandate reporting of any irregularities that could lead to unfair competition or violations of trade agreements. Prompt reporting allows for an objective investigation and corrective action, thereby upholding the integrity of the Academy's operations and preventing potential legal repercussions for the institution and individuals involved. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy, hoping it goes unnoticed. This failure is ethically reprehensible as it constitutes complicity in potentially fraudulent or unfair practices. From a regulatory standpoint, it violates the duty of diligence and the obligation to act in good faith, which are implicitly or explicitly required by Russian foreign trade legislation. Such inaction could lead to severe penalties, including fines, reputational damage, and disciplinary action for all involved. Another incorrect approach would be to directly confront the individual suspected of misconduct without proper authorization or evidence. While seemingly proactive, this can escalate the situation unnecessarily, potentially leading to the destruction of evidence or creating a hostile work environment. It bypasses established internal procedures for investigation and resolution, which are designed to ensure fairness and due process. This approach risks violating privacy rights and could be construed as an unauthorized investigation, which is outside the scope of an individual employee's authority under Russian labor and administrative law. A further incorrect approach would be to attempt to rectify the situation independently by altering records or influencing the outcome of the monitoring system. This is a direct violation of multiple legal and ethical principles. It constitutes falsification of data, obstruction of justice, and a breach of trust. Russian law strictly prohibits the manipulation of official records and any actions that undermine the integrity of regulatory oversight. Such behavior would undoubtedly lead to severe disciplinary and legal consequences. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the relevant regulatory framework, including laws on foreign economic activity, competition law, and internal institutional policies. When faced with a potential ethical or regulatory breach, professionals should prioritize reporting to the designated compliance or supervisory authority. This ensures that the matter is handled through established, impartial channels. Documentation of observations and communications is also crucial. If unsure about the interpretation of a regulation, seeking guidance from legal counsel or the compliance department is the appropriate step, rather than making assumptions or taking unilateral action. Question 2. The investigation demonstrates that a junior analyst at a Russian trading firm has inadvertently gained access to confidential, non-public projections from a key competitor regarding their upcoming product launch strategy and pricing. This information, if acted upon, could allow the firm to preemptively adjust its own market strategy, significantly impacting the competitor's launch and potentially securing a dominant market position. The analyst, aware of the sensitive nature of the information, is now faced with a decision on how to proceed. Option A. Discreetly share the information with a trusted contact in another firm that might benefit from it in exchange for future favors. Option B. Discard the information, assuming it is irrelevant or too risky to act upon, and continue with the firm's existing strategy without further investigation. Option C. Immediately inform the firm's senior management and legal department about the leaked information, recommending a strategy that avoids leveraging the confidential data for immediate competitive gain and instead focuses on independent market analysis and ethical competitive positioning. Option D. Use the competitor's projected pricing to undercut their upcoming launch, thereby capturing a significant market share. The correct answer is C. Immediately inform the firm's senior management and legal department about the leaked information, recommending a strategy that avoids leveraging the confidential data for immediate competitive gain, and instead focuses on independent market analysis and ethical competitive positioning. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate financial interests of the company and the long-term ethical and legal obligations concerning fair competition and market integrity. The decision-maker must navigate the temptation to exploit a temporary informational advantage against the principles of transparency and equitable market access, which are fundamental to the regulatory framework governing foreign trade and economic relations within the Russian Federation. Careful judgment is required to uphold professional integrity and avoid actions that could lead to legal repercussions, reputational damage, and erosion of trust among market participants. The correct approach involves prioritizing adherence to the principles of fair competition and the spirit of international trade agreements that Russia is a party to, even in the absence of explicit prohibitions for this specific scenario. This means refraining from leveraging the obtained information for immediate, unfair advantage, and instead focusing on developing a competitive strategy based on publicly available data and legitimate market research. This approach aligns with the overarching goals of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade Entrance exam, which emphasizes ethical conduct and a sound understanding of international economic law and practice. It upholds the principle of good faith in business dealings and respects the integrity of the market. An incorrect approach would be to immediately act upon the leaked information to secure a significant competitive edge. This would constitute an unethical exploitation of privileged information, potentially violating principles of fair competition and market transparency, even if not explicitly codified as a criminal offense in this precise instance. Such an action could be interpreted as an unfair trade practice, undermining the trust and stability of the market. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the information entirely without considering its implications or potential for misuse. This passive stance fails to address the ethical dilemma and could inadvertently allow for the information to be used by others in a detrimental way, or miss an opportunity to proactively address potential market distortions. A third incorrect approach would be to attempt to further disseminate or monetize the leaked information. This would be a clear violation of ethical conduct and potentially illegal, as it involves profiting from confidential data obtained through unauthorized means. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the ethical and legal implications of any situation. This involves consulting relevant codes of conduct, internal company policies, and applicable laws and regulations. When faced with ambiguity, seeking guidance from legal counsel or ethics committees is crucial. The principle of when in doubt, err on the side of caution and ethical conduct should guide decisions, especially in matters concerning market fairness and competitive practices. Question 3. The analysis reveals that a member of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade's Admissions Committee has a distant relative applying for a highly competitive program. While the relative meets the minimum academic requirements, their application is not as strong as some other candidates. The committee member is aware of the relative's application and feels a sense of obligation to ensure they are considered favorably. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the committee member? Option A. Disclose the familial relationship to the admissions committee and recuse themselves from any discussion or vote concerning the relative's application, ensuring the decision is made solely by impartial committee members based on established criteria. Option B. Discreetly contact other committee members to put in a good word for the relative, highlighting their family ties and suggesting they be given special consideration. Option C. Proceed with evaluating the relative's application without mentioning the familial connection, assuming their academic merit will speak for itself and that personal bias can be effectively managed. Option D. Advocate for the relative's application to the committee, emphasizing their potential and the familial connection, suggesting they deserve a chance due to their background. The correct answer is A. Disclose the familial relationship to the admissions committee and recuse themselves from any discussion or vote concerning the relative's application, ensuring the decision is made solely by impartial committee members based on established criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial interests of a client with the long-term integrity of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trades, RAFT, admissions process, and the ethical obligations of an admissions committee member. The core conflict lies between a potential applicant's familial connection and the principle of merit-based selection, which is fundamental to maintaining the academic reputation and fairness of RAFT. The admissions committee member must navigate this delicate situation without compromising their professional integrity or violating established RAFT regulations and ethical codes. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the established admissions criteria and procedures, ensuring that all applicants are evaluated solely on their academic merit and suitability for the program, regardless of personal connections. This approach upholds the principle of fairness and transparency, which are cornerstones of any reputable academic institution. Specifically, it aligns with the implied ethical guidelines of RAFT, which would prioritize objective evaluation to maintain academic standards and prevent any perception of favoritism or undue influence. By recusing oneself from the decision-making process concerning the relative's application, the committee member avoids any conflict of interest and ensures that the decision is made by impartial parties based on objective criteria. This demonstrates a commitment to the integrity of the admissions process and the institution's reputation. An incorrect approach of advocating for preferential treatment for the relative, even if framed as helping a family friend, directly violates the ethical imperative of impartiality. This would undermine the meritocratic system and could lead to the admission of less qualified candidates, thereby lowering academic standards and damaging RAF's standing. It also creates an unfair advantage for one applicant over others who have met the criteria through their own efforts. Another incorrect approach of downplaying the familial relationship and proceeding with the evaluation as if no connection existed is also professionally unacceptable. This is a form of ethical compromise that, while not overtly advocating for preferential treatment, still carries the risk of unconscious bias influencing the evaluation. It fails to acknowledge and proactively manage a potential conflict of interest, which is a critical aspect of professional conduct in admissions. A further incorrect approach of directly contacting the admissions committee members to put in a good word for the relative is a clear breach of ethical conduct. This constitutes an attempt to exert undue influence and bypass the established, objective evaluation process. It is a direct contravention of the principles of fairness and transparency and could lead to disciplinary action. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the institution's ethical codes and admissions policies. When a potential conflict of interest arises, the first step is to identify it clearly. The next step is to consult relevant policies and guidelines. If a conflict is confirmed, the professional must proactively disclose it and, if necessary, recuse themselves from any decision-making process that could be influenced by the conflict. Transparency and adherence to established procedures are paramount to maintaining professional integrity and the trust placed in them by the institution and its stakeholders. Question 4. Governance review demonstrates that a senior faculty member involved in evaluating proposals for a new international trade consultancy partnership has a close family member who is a principal shareholder in one of the bidding companies. This relationship was not disclosed during the initial proposal submission phase. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the faculty member to take immediately upon realizing this oversight? Option A. Withdraw from the evaluation process without formally disclosing the relationship, assuming this will prevent any conflict. Option B. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the relevant procurement committee and recuse themselves from all further evaluation and decision-making processes related to this partnership. Option C. Proceed with the evaluation as planned, believing that their professional objectivity will not be compromised by the personal connection. Option D. Continue with the evaluation process, but subtly steer the assessment to ensure the family member's company is favorably considered, rationalizing that the company is genuinely qualified. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the relevant procurement committee and recuse themselves from all further evaluation and decision-making processes related to this partnership. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a desire to secure a valuable contract and the obligation to adhere to ethical principles and the specific regulations governing foreign trade and academic integrity within the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade. The pressure to secure the contract, especially if it promises significant benefits to the Academy, can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential ethical breaches. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional interests with professional responsibility. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency, integrity, and adherence to the established procurement procedures and ethical guidelines of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade. This means acknowledging the potential conflict of interest, disclosing it appropriately, and recusing oneself from the decision-making process to ensure fairness and prevent any perception of impropriety. This aligns with the principles of good governance and the ethical standards expected of individuals within academic and foreign trade institutions, which typically mandate impartiality and the avoidance of situations where personal interests could influence professional judgment. The specific regulations of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade, while not detailed here, would undoubtedly contain provisions for conflict of interest management and ethical conduct in procurement. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the evaluation without disclosing the relationship would be a direct violation of ethical principles and likely specific Academy regulations concerning conflicts of interest. This failure stems from a disregard for transparency and impartiality, potentially leading to biased decision-making and undermining the integrity of the procurement process. Another incorrect approach, which is to subtly influence the evaluation to favor the company due to the personal connection, represents a more severe ethical breach. This involves active manipulation of the process for personal or familial gain, directly contravening the principles of fairness and merit-based selection. Such actions erode trust in the institution and could have legal ramifications depending on the specific Russian laws governing procurement and corruption. A further incorrect approach, which is to withdraw from the evaluation but not formally disclose the conflict, is also problematic. While it avoids direct manipulation, it fails to uphold the principle of proactive transparency. Proper disclosure allows the Academy to make informed decisions about managing the conflict, such as reassigning the evaluation duties, ensuring the process remains robust and defensible. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear framework. 1. Identify the potential conflict of interest. 2. Consult relevant institutional policies, codes of conduct, and regulations. 3. Disclose the conflict to the appropriate authority or committee. 4. Seek guidance on how to manage or recuse oneself from the situation. 5. Act with integrity and prioritize the institution's best interests and ethical standards above personal or familial connections. Question 5. To address the challenge of securing a valuable international partnership for the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade, a representative is approached by a potential partner who offers a significant personal gift before any formal agreement is reached. The representative is aware that the Academy has strict guidelines regarding conflicts of interest and the acceptance of gifts from external parties. Considering the Academy's regulatory framework and ethical expectations for its representatives in foreign trade, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Politely decline the gift, explaining that Academy policy prohibits accepting such items before a formal contract is established, and suggest discussing the partnership further through official channels. Option B. Accept the gift discreetly, assuming it is a gesture of goodwill and will not influence the decision-making process, and proceed with evaluating the partnership proposal. Option C. Proceed with the partnership evaluation as planned, considering the gift as a minor detail that does not warrant formal attention, given the potential benefits of the contract to the Academy. Option D. Inform the potential partner that a personal consulting fee would be more appropriate than a gift, as it can be structured to benefit the representative directly while still facilitating the partnership. The correct answer is A. Politely decline the gift, explaining that Academy policy prohibits accepting such items before a formal contract is established, and suggest discussing the partnership further through official channels. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a desire to secure a valuable contract and the obligation to adhere to ethical principles and the specific regulations governing foreign trade and academic integrity within the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade. The pressure to achieve results, coupled with the potential for personal gain or reputational damage, necessitates careful ethical navigation. The core of the challenge lies in distinguishing between legitimate business development activities and actions that could be construed as unethical or even illegal under the Academy's framework. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency, adherence to established procurement procedures, and avoiding any actions that could create a conflict of interest or compromise the integrity of the selection process. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of fairness, honesty, and accountability expected of individuals representing an academic institution in foreign trade dealings. Specifically, it upholds the spirit and letter of regulations that likely mandate impartial evaluation of potential partners and prohibit the acceptance of personal benefits that could influence professional judgment. The Academy's entrance exam context implies a need to demonstrate an understanding of responsible conduct in international business, which includes respecting due diligence and avoiding undue influence. An incorrect approach that involves accepting a lavish gift from a potential partner before a contract is finalized is ethically flawed because it creates an immediate appearance of impropriety and a potential conflict of interest. Such an action directly contravenes principles of impartiality and could be seen as an attempt to unduly influence the decision-making process, violating likely Academy regulations on gifts and hospitality. Furthermore, it bypasses established procurement protocols, suggesting a lack of respect for due diligence and fair competition. Another incorrect approach, which is to discreetly inquire about the partner's willingness to offer a personal consulting fee to an individual associated with the Academy, is also professionally unacceptable. This action borders on, or could be interpreted as, soliciting a bribe or engaging in corrupt practices. It undermines the integrity of the Academy's operations and exposes both the individual and the institution to significant reputational and legal risks. Such behavior directly violates ethical codes that prohibit personal enrichment through professional position and any form of bribery or corruption, which are strictly regulated in international trade. Third incorrect approach, which is to overlook the potential ethical implications and proceed with the contract based on the perceived benefits to the Academy, demonstrates a failure to conduct proper ethical due diligence. While the contract might be beneficial, the means by which it is secured are paramount. Ignoring potential ethical breaches or conflicts of interest, even if not explicitly illegal, can lead to long-term damage to the Academy's reputation and trust. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a proactive assessment of ethical risks, consultation with relevant internal policies or ethics officers, and a commitment to upholding the highest standards of integrity, even when faced with pressure or perceived opportunities. Question 6. The review process indicates that a foreign trade partner, with whom your organization is negotiating a significant contract, has provided documentation that appears to contain discrepancies suggesting potential circumvention of Russian import regulations. You have a personal relationship with a key individual at the partner company. What is the most ethically and legally sound approach to address this situation? Adhering strictly to the regulatory framework and guidelines relevant to the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade entrance exam. Option A. Immediately report the suspected discrepancies to the relevant Russian customs authorities and inform your organization's legal department, while refraining from discussing the matter with the foreign trade partner until instructed by legal counsel. Option B. Inform your personal contact at the foreign trade partner company about the detected discrepancies and advise them on how to rectify the documentation before it is formally reviewed by your organization or any authorities. Option C. Confront the foreign trade partner directly about the discrepancies, leveraging your personal relationship to seek clarification and a resolution without involving your organization or external authorities at this stage. Option D. Disregard the discrepancies, assuming they are minor administrative errors, and proceed with the contract negotiations to avoid jeopardizing the business relationship and potential profits. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the suspected discrepancies to the relevant Russian customs authorities and inform your organization's legal department, while refraining from discussing the matter with the foreign trade partner until instructed by legal counsel. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between maintaining client confidentiality and the obligation to report potential violations of Russian Federation law, specifically within the context of foreign trade regulations relevant to the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade Entrance exam. The dilemma lies in balancing the duty of loyalty to a client or business partner with the broader legal and ethical responsibilities to uphold the integrity of foreign trade practices and national economic interests. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing duties without compromising professional standards or legal compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough internal assessment and, if necessary, consultation with legal counsel or relevant regulatory bodies within the Russian Federation. This approach prioritizes understanding the full scope of the potential violation and its implications under Russian law before taking any definitive action. It acknowledges the importance of due diligence and adherence to established legal procedures. Specifically, under Russian Federation law and the ethical guidelines applicable to professionals operating within its foreign trade sector, there is a strong emphasis on compliance and the prevention of illicit activities. Reporting suspected violations, after a reasonable internal investigation and consultation, aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the legal framework designed to safeguard the national economy and international trade relations. This approach ensures that actions are taken based on a well-informed understanding of the facts and the relevant legal provisions, minimizing the risk of unfounded accusations or misinterpretations. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disclose the information without proper verification or consultation. This could lead to premature accusations, damage to reputation, and potential legal repercussions for the individual or their organization, especially if the information turns out to be inaccurate or misinterpreted. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the information entirely. This constitutes a failure to act responsibly and could result in complicity in illegal activities, leading to severe penalties under Russian law and a breach of professional ethics. Failing to consult with legal experts or relevant authorities when faced with potential legal violations is also an unacceptable approach, as it bypasses established mechanisms for addressing such issues and demonstrates a lack of professional diligence. The professional decision-making process in such situation should involve a structured approach. First, gather all available facts and assess their credibility. Second, identify the potential legal and ethical implications under the specific regulatory framework of the Russian Federation. Third, consult with internal compliance officers or legal counsel to determine the appropriate course of action, which may include further investigation or reporting to the relevant authorities. Fourth, act in accordance with legal obligations and ethical principles, prioritizing transparency and accountability where legally mandated. Question 7. What factors determine the ethical permissibility of offering a token of appreciation to a potential foreign business partner during contract negotiations for the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade? Option A. The potential impact on the negotiation timeline and the likelihood of securing the contract. Option B. The explicit wording of the contract and whether it mentions gifts. Option C. The adherence to Russian Federation laws and Academy internal regulations regarding gifts and hospitality in foreign economic relations. Option D. The perceived value of the token and whether it is customary in the partner's home country. The correct answer is D. The perceived value of the token and whether it is customary in the partner's home country. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a desire to secure a valuable contract and the obligation to adhere to ethical principles and the specific regulations governing foreign trade practices in Russia. The pressure to meet targets and the potential for personal gain can cloud judgment, making it crucial to navigate such situations with integrity and a thorough understanding of applicable laws. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to the established procedures for engaging with foreign partners, even if it means a potentially longer or more complex negotiation process. This aligns with the principles of fair competition and anti-corruption measures mandated by Russian legislation concerning foreign economic activity. Specifically, it upholds the spirit of regulations designed to prevent undue influence or bribery in securing international trade agreements, ensuring that decisions are based on merit and mutual benefit rather than unethical inducements. An incorrect approach that involves offering a personal gift, even if seemingly modest, directly contravenes regulations prohibiting bribery and the offering of improper advantages to foreign officials or business representatives. Such actions can lead to severe legal consequences, including fines and reputational damage, and undermine the integrity of international trade relations. Another incorrect approach, that of withholding crucial information about potential risks to expedite the deal, is ethically unsound and potentially illegal, as it misrepresents the true value and viability of the contract, leading to future disputes and financial losses for all parties involved. Furthermore, circumventing established internal approval processes to rush the agreement demonstrates a disregard for corporate governance and risk management protocols, which are essential for responsible foreign trade operations. Professionals in foreign trade should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential ethical conflicts. This should be followed by a thorough review of relevant Russian laws and academy guidelines pertaining to foreign economic relations and business conduct. Seeking advice from legal counsel or senior management when in doubt is a critical step. The ultimate decision should always prioritize legal compliance, ethical conduct, and the long-term reputation and interests of the academy over short-term gains. Question 8. Cost-benefit analysis shows that accepting a substantial facilitation fee from a foreign supplier, which is not explicitly requested but implied as a prerequisite for securing a highly profitable contract for the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade, could significantly boost departmental resources. However, this fee is not part of any official tariff or charge, and appears to be an unofficial payment to expedite processing and ensure favorable consideration. Option A. Report the offer to the relevant internal compliance department and external regulatory bodies for investigation, without directly engaging with the supplier on the fee itself. Option B. Propose a counteroffer that includes a smaller, officially documented service charge to the supplier, attempting to legitimize the payment while still securing a financial benefit. Option C. Decline the offer, citing adherence to Russian Federation laws on foreign economic activity and anti-corruption, and seek to negotiate the contract based on merit and standard procedures. Option D. Accept the facilitation fee as a necessary operational expense to secure the contract, arguing that it is a common practice in international trade and beneficial for the Academy's immediate financial needs. The correct answer is C. Decline the offer, citing adherence to Russian Federation laws on foreign economic activity and anti-corruption, and seek to negotiate the contract based on merit and standard procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it forces a decision-maker to balance potential economic gains against ethical obligations and regulatory compliance within the context of Russian foreign trade. The core dilemma lies in the potential for personal enrichment versus the duty to uphold fair competition and prevent illicit practices, which are strictly regulated under Russian law governing foreign economic activity. Careful judgment is required to navigate the gray area between legitimate business opportunities and actions that could be construed as bribery or corruption, even if not explicitly solicited. The correct approach involves prioritizing adherence to Russian Federation laws concerning foreign economic relations, anti-corruption statutes, and ethical business conduct. This means refusing any offer that could be interpreted as a bribe or undue influence, regardless of the perceived cost-benefit advantage. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of integrity and the legal framework that prohibits bribery and mandates transparency in foreign trade dealings. Specifically, Russian law, including provisions within the Civil Code and laws on combating corruption, aims to ensure fair market conditions and prevent the abuse of official positions or business relationships for personal gain. Upholding these principles safeguards the reputation of the individual and the organization, and avoids severe legal repercussions. An incorrect approach would be to accept the offer, rationalizing it as a necessary cost of doing business or a customary practice. This fails to recognize that such actions, even if not explicitly demanded, can constitute bribery under Russian law, which often focuses on the intent and the outcome of providing an advantage. This approach violates the ethical imperative to act with integrity and the legal prohibition against offering or accepting inducements that distort fair competition. Another incorrect approach would be to seek a loophole or a way to disguise the payment, which still falls under the umbrella of illicit activity and demonstrates a disregard for the spirit and letter of the law. This approach is ethically bankrupt and legally perilous. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of relevant Russian legislation, including laws on foreign economic activity, anti-corruption, and corporate ethics. Professionals should consult internal company policies and, if necessary, seek legal counsel. A critical step is to assess the offer not just on its immediate financial benefit, but on its potential legal and reputational risks. When faced with ambiguity or pressure, the default should always be to err on the side of caution and strict compliance with the law and ethical standards. Question 9. Market research demonstrates that a promising new supplier for the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade's international procurement needs has emerged. During the initial review of potential partners, you discover that the owner of this highly recommended company is a close personal friend with whom you have a long-standing relationship, including shared business ventures in the past. You are tasked with evaluating this supplier's suitability. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with the evaluation, but subtly steer the assessment towards a favorable outcome for your friend's company, assuming your professional judgment remains objective. Option B. Inform your friend about the evaluation process and suggest ways they can strengthen their proposal to ensure they are selected. Option C. Immediately disclose your personal relationship with the supplier's owner to your supervisor and the relevant ethics committee, and recuse yourself from any further evaluation or decision-making regarding this supplier. Option D. Recommend the supplier based on their market research merits, without mentioning your personal connection, believing your friendship will not influence your professional assessment. The correct answer is C. Immediately disclose your personal relationship with the supplier's owner to your supervisor and the relevant ethics committee, and recuse yourself from any further evaluation or decision-making regarding this supplier. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the pursuit of business opportunities with adherence to ethical principles and the specific regulatory framework governing foreign trade in Russia. The core dilemma lies in the potential for a conflict of interest and the obligation to act in the best interest of the Academy, not personal gain or the benefit of a third party. Navigating this requires a deep understanding of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade's internal policies, ethical codes, and relevant Russian legislation concerning conflicts of interest and professional conduct in international business dealings. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency, integrity, and adherence to established procedures. This means immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the relevant authorities within the Academy and recusing oneself from any decision-making processes that could be influenced by the personal relationship. This approach aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of professional conduct, which demand impartiality and the avoidance of situations where personal interests could compromise professional judgment. Specifically, Russian regulations and the Academy's internal guidelines likely mandate such disclosure and recusal to prevent corruption, ensure fair competition, and maintain the reputation of the institution. Acting with integrity in this manner upholds the trust placed in professionals by their organization and the broader business community. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the recommendation without disclosure. This failure stems from a disregard for the principle of impartiality and a potential violation of internal policies and Russian laws against conflicts of interest. Such an action could lead to accusations of favoritism, unfair advantage, and a breach of fiduciary duty to the Academy. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to subtly influence the decision-making process in favor of the acquaintance's company, even without direct personal gain. This is ethically unsound as it undermines the integrity of the selection process and violates the duty to act in the best interest of the Academy. It also risks violating regulations that prohibit undue influence and require objective evaluation of all potential partners. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation and hope it goes unnoticed. This passive approach is a dereliction of professional responsibility. It fails to address the ethical and regulatory implications proactively and leaves the academy vulnerable to potential repercussions if the conflict is discovered later. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to ethical conduct and a failure to uphold professional standards. The professional decision-making process in such situation should involve a clear step-by-step evaluation. 1. Identify the potential conflict of interest. 2. Consult relevant internal policies and external regulations, in this case, those pertaining to the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade and Russian foreign trade laws. 3. Disclose the conflict to the appropriate supervisory body or designated ethics officer. 4. Recuse oneself from any discussion, evaluations, or decisions related to the matter. 5. Document all actions taken. This structured approach ensures that decisions are made ethically, legally, and in the best interest of the organization. Question 10. The control framework reveals that a student preparing for the All-Russian Academy for Foreign Trade entrance exam has inadvertently come into possession of a draft of an upcoming examination paper. What is the most ethically and procedurally sound course of action for the student? Option A. Use the draft paper to focus study efforts on the identified topics, ensuring a higher chance of success. Option B. Discard the draft paper and continue studying as originally planned, without reporting the incident. Option C. Discreetly share the draft paper with a few trusted friends who are also preparing for the exam. Option D. Immediately report the discovery to the examination committee or designated authority of the academy, without retaining or sharing the document. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the discovery to the examination committee or designated authority of the academy, without retaining or sharing the document. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation where a student, preparing for the All-Russian Academy for Foreign Trade entrance exam, has discovered a draft of an upcoming exam paper. This scenario is professionally challenging because it presents a direct conflict between academic integrity, fairness to other candidates, and personal gain. The student's knowledge of the exam content before the official examination could lead to an unfair advantage, undermining the meritocratic principles of the entrance process. Careful judgment is required to navigate this ethical minefield without compromising personal integrity or the integrity of the examination system. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the discovery to the appropriate examination authorities, without retaining or disseminating the information. This upholds the principle of fairness and equal opportunity for all candidates, as mandated by the ethical guidelines governing academic institutions and entrance examinations in Russia. By reporting, the student acts as a responsible stakeholder in the examination process, contributing to its credibility and preventing potential misconduct. This aligns with the general principles of academic honesty and the specific regulations that prohibit the unauthorized possession or disclosure of examination materials, which are implicitly understood to be part of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade's examination framework. An incorrect approach of using the leaked information to prepare would be a severe breach of academic integrity. This action directly violates the trust placed in candidates and the examination board, leading to an unfair assessment of knowledge and abilities. Would also constitute a violation of the implicit contract of honesty expected from all participants in the entrance process. Another incorrect approach of ignoring the discovery and proceeding with normal preparation, without reporting, is also professionally unacceptable. While it may seem like a passive stance, it implicitly condones the potential for unfairness and does not actively contribute to upholding the integrity of the examination. This inaction allows a potential breach of regulations to go unaddressed, which can have broader implications for the reputation and fairness of the Academy's admissions process. A third incorrect approach of sharing the information with friends or classmates is equally detrimental. This not only extends the unfair advantage to multiple individuals, but also escalates the breach of trust and academic misconduct. It creates a network of unfairness, further eroding the credibility of the entrance examination. Professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of ethical obligations and regulatory expectations. Professionals should prioritize honesty, integrity, and fairness. When faced with a potential breach of these principles, the immediate step should be to consult relevant codes of conduct or regulations. If the situation involves sensitive or confidential information, reporting it to the designated authority is paramount. This proactive and transparent approach ensures that any issues are addressed appropriately and that the integrity of the process is maintained. Question 11. Governance review demonstrates that a foreign supplier, with whom the Academy is negotiating a significant procurement contract, has offered a senior Academy official a valuable piece of artwork as a token of appreciation for their efforts in facilitating the ongoing discussions. This offer is made outside of any formal gift-giving policy or established protocol. What is the most ethically and professionally sound course of action for the Academy official? Option A. Disclose the offer to the designated Academy authority responsible for ethics and compliance, and await their guidance on how to proceed in accordance with Academy regulations and ethical standards. Option B. Immediately refuse the artwork, citing a strict personal policy against accepting any gifts from suppliers without further consultation. Option C. Accept the artwork, considering it a customary gesture of goodwill in international business relations, and inform the supplier that it will be displayed at the Academy. Option D. Suggest to the supplier that a cash equivalent of the artwork would be more practical for the Academy's immediate needs. The correct answer is C. Accept the artwork, considering it a customary gesture of goodwill in international business relations, and inform the supplier that it will be displayed at the Academy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in navigating potential conflicts of interest and upholding ethical standards within the context of international trade, a core focus of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade. Challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of business opportunities with the imperative to act with integrity and transparency, particularly when dealing with foreign partners and potentially sensitive information. Careful judgment is required to ensure that personal gain does not compromise professional duties or violate established ethical codes. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to the Academy's code of conduct regarding gifts and hospitality. This means disclosing the offer of a significant gift from a foreign supplier to the relevant internal authority for review and guidance. This action aligns with the ethical principles of avoiding even the appearance of impropriety and ensuring that business decisions are made on merit rather than through undue influence. Russian regulatory frameworks and the Academy's internal guidelines would likely mandate such disclosure to prevent corruption and maintain fair business practices. An incorrect approach would be to accept the gift without disclosure, believing it to be a customary gesture of goodwill. This fails to acknowledge the potential for such gifts to create a conflict of interest or to be perceived as a bribe, thereby violating ethical principles and potentially Russian anti-corruption laws. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately refuse the gift without considering the diplomatic implications or seeking internal guidance. While seemingly ethical, this might unnecessarily damage a valuable business relationship without first exploring permissible avenues for accepting hospitality or gifts, as defined by the Academy's policies. Finally, attempting to negotiate the value of the gift or suggesting an alternative form of appreciation without proper disclosure and authorization would also be professionally unsound, as it bypasses established governance procedures and could be construed as an attempt to circumvent ethical guidelines. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential ethical conflicts. This involves understanding the relevant internal policies, codes of conduct, and applicable laws. The next step is to seek clarification and guidance from appropriate internal authorities, such as a compliance officer or supervisor, before taking any action. Documenting all communications and decisions is crucial for accountability. This systematic approach ensures that actions are not only legal but also ethically defensible and aligned with the organization's values. Question 12. Compliance review shows that during negotiations for a new international partnership agreement, a foreign delegation has subtly hinted at offering significant, undisclosed facilitation fees to expedite the approval process and secure more favorable terms for their country. The Academy's negotiating team is under pressure to finalize the agreement quickly. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the Academy's negotiating team? Option A. Attempt to negotiate the amount of the facilitation fees to ensure they are not excessively high, while still keeping their existence discreet to avoid complications with internal reporting. Option B. Politely decline any discussion of facilitation fees or undisclosed benefits. Clearly state that all negotiations must adhere strictly to the Academy's established ethical guidelines and the regulatory framework for international trade, and immediately report the delegation's suggestion to the Academy's compliance department for guidance. Option C. Accept the implied offer of facilitation fees as a standard practice in international negotiations, and proceed with the agreement, assuming these fees are for legitimate administrative purposes. Option D. Inform the foreign delegation that while direct facilitation fees are not permissible, the Academy could consider offering other forms of indirect benefits, such as preferential access to research facilities or joint publications, without explicit mention of these as concessions for the agreement. The correct answer is B. Politely decline any discussion of facilitation fees or undisclosed benefits. Clearly state that all negotiations must adhere strictly to the Academy's established ethical guidelines and the regulatory framework for international trade, and immediately report the delegation's suggestion to the Academy's Compliance Department for guidance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a desire to secure a beneficial trade agreement and the obligation to adhere to the strict ethical guidelines and regulatory framework governing international trade practices, as defined by the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade Entrance Exams stipulated regulations. The pressure to achieve a favorable outcome for the Academy, potentially through concessions that skirt ethical boundaries, creates a complex decision-making environment. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests without compromising integrity or violating established rules. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to the established regulatory framework. This means clearly documenting all interactions, ensuring that any proposed concessions or benefits offered are within the bounds of permissible practices, and seeking explicit approval from the relevant internal authorities before proceeding. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant because it upholds the principles of fair dealing, prevents potential conflicts of interest, and ensures that the Academy's reputation and integrity are protected. It aligns with the spirit of international trade as fostering mutually beneficial relationships built on trust and adherence to rules. As implicitly expected by the entrants, exams focus on responsible conduct. An incorrect approach would be to offer preferential treatment or undisclosed benefits to the foreign delegation in exchange for a more favorable agreement. This is ethically problematic as it constitutes a form of bribery or undue influence, undermining the principles of fair competition and potentially leading to corrupt practices. From a regulatory standpoint, such actions would violate the principles of ethical conduct expected of representatives of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade, potentially leading to severe repercussions, including invalidation of the agreement and damage to the Academy's standing. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential ethical implications and proceed with the agreement without proper due diligence or internal consultation, especially if there are indications of questionable practices by the foreign delegation. This demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a failure to uphold the Academy's ethical standards. It exposes the Academy to significant reputational and legal risks, as it implies a willingness to overlook or condone unethical behavior. A further incorrect approach would be to attempt to conceal the nature of the concessions or benefits being offered from internal oversight. This is a clear breach of trust and transparency, and it suggests an intent to circumvent established procedures and ethical guidelines. Such concealment is inherently unethical and likely to be in violation of internal policies and potentially external regulations governing international trade and academic institutions. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the situation against the established ethical code and regulatory framework. This includes identifying potential conflicts of interest, assessing the legality and ethicality of proposed actions, consulting with supervisors or ethics committees when in doubt, and documenting all decisions and actions. Prioritizing integrity and long-term reputational health over short-term gains is paramount. Question 13. Governance review demonstrates that a candidate for the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade Entrance Exam has a family with significant ties to international trade organizations that could potentially enhance the Academy's global partnerships and funding opportunities. The candidate's academic record is satisfactory but not exceptional. The admissions officer responsible for reviewing this application is aware of these potential benefits to the Academy. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the admissions officer? Option A. Evaluate the candidates solely based on their performance in the entrance examination and adherence to all established admission criteria, without considering the family's potential benefits to the Academy. Option B. Discreetly inquire with senior management about how to best accommodate this candidate's application, given the potential advantages for the academy. Option C. Consider the potential for enhanced international partnerships and funding as a mitigating factor in the candidate's overall assessment, even if their exam score is slightly below the typical threshold. Option D. Suggest to the candidate that their family's connections might be leveraged to improve their chances if they were to reapply in a future cycle with a stronger academic profile. The correct answer is A. Evaluate the candidate solely based on their performance in the entrance examination and adherence to all established admission criteria, without considering the family's potential benefits to the academy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate financial interests of the academy and the long-term ethical obligations to uphold academic integrity and fair competition. The decision-maker must navigate the potential for personal gain against the principles of transparency and impartiality, which are foundational to the reputation and credibility of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade. The pressure to secure funding, especially from a potentially influential source, can create a bias that needs to be consciously managed. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integrity of the admission process and adhering strictly to the established examination regulations and ethical guidelines of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade. This means ensuring that all candidates, regardless of their background or potential benefits to the academy, are evaluated solely on their merits and performance in the entrance exam. The regulatory framework for Russian educational institutions, including entrance exams, emphasizes fairness, objectivity, and the prevention of undue influence or favoritism. Upholding these principles is paramount to maintaining the academy's standing and ensuring that admitted students are genuinely qualified. An incorrect approach would be to consider the potential benefits of the applicant's family connection to the academy's funding or international partnerships. This introduces a conflict of interest and compromises the principle of merit-based selection. Such an approach violates the ethical duty to treat all candidates equally and could lead to the admission of unqualified individuals, thereby undermining the academic standards of the academy. Furthermore, it could be seen as a breach of internal regulations concerning the impartiality of examination procedures and potentially expose the academy to reputational damage and accusations of corruption. Another incorrect approach would be to seek informal guidance from senior management on how to handle this specific applicant, implying a desire to deviate from standard procedures. This bypasses established protocols for ensuring fairness and transparency in admissions. It suggests a willingness to bend rules for expediency or personal advantage, which is contrary to the principles of good governance and ethical conduct expected of individuals involved in the admissions process. This could also create a precedent for future irregularities. Further incorrect approach would be to subtly alter the examination criteria or scoring to favor this applicant, even without explicit instruction. This is a direct violation of academic integrity and the principles of fair assessment. It undermines the validity of the entrance examination as a measure of a candidate's aptitude and knowledge, and it is ethically reprehensible. Such actions, if discovered, would have severe consequences for the individuals involved and the institution. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the academy's regulations, ethical codes, and the principles of fair competition. It requires an objective assessment of the candidate's qualifications based solely on the established examination criteria. If there is any perceived pressure or suggestion of impropriety, the professional should consult the relevant internal policies on conflicts of interest and ethical conduct, and if necessary, report the situation to the appropriate oversight body within the academy. Transparency and adherence to established procedures are the cornerstones of ethical decision-making in academic admissions. Question 14. Benchmark analysis indicates that a foreign company seeking to secure a significant import contract with an organization affiliated with the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade has offered a substantial consulting fee to an individual involved in the evaluation process, contingent upon the successful award of the contract. This offer was made informally during a business dinner. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the individual receiving this offer, strictly adhering to the regulatory framework and guidelines applicable to the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade entrance exam? Option A. Accept the consulting fee discreetly, ensuring it is not formally documented, and proceed with the contract evaluation as usual, believing it will not influence their professional judgment. Option B. Acknowledge the offer but privately assure the foreign company that their consulting would be beneficial and proceed with the evaluation, hoping the contract is awarded on merit without further discussion of the fee. Option C. Politely decline the offer, immediately report it to their supervisor and the Academy's ethics committee, and recuse themselves from any further involvement in the evaluation and selection process for this contract. Option D. Ignore the offer and continue with the contract evaluation as if it were never made, assuming it was a casual remark with no serious intent. The correct answer is C. Politely decline the offer, immediately report it to their supervisor and the Academy's ethics committee, and recuse themselves from any further involvement in the evaluation and selection process for this contract. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a potential business opportunity and the ethical obligation to uphold the integrity of foreign trade practices, as governed by the regulatory framework of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade Entrance Exam. The pressure to secure a significant contract, coupled with the personal benefit offered, creates a situation requiring careful judgment and adherence to established ethical codes and relevant Russian Federation laws concerning foreign economic activity and anti-corruption. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency, adherence to established procurement procedures, and avoiding any actions that could be perceived as bribery or undue influence. This aligns with the principles of fair competition and the prohibition of corrupt practices, which are fundamental to maintaining trust and legitimacy in international trade. Specifically, Russian Federation law on combating corruption and the internal ethical guidelines of the Academy would mandate reporting such an offer and recusing oneself from any decision-making process related to the potential contract. This ensures that business decisions are made on merit and not influenced by personal gain, thereby safeguarding the reputation and integrity of the Academy and its representatives. An incorrect approach that involves accepting the offer of a consulting fee or engaging in private discussions to expedite the contract would constitute a serious ethical and legal violation. This would be considered bribery or an attempt to gain an unfair advantage, directly contravening Article 17 of the federal law on combating corruption in the Russian Federation, which prohibits receiving bribes in any form. Such actions undermine fair competition, erode public trust, and can lead to severe legal repercussions, including criminal prosecution and professional sanctions. Another incorrect approach, such as downplaying the significance of the offer and proceeding with the contract without disclosing it, represents a failure to uphold professional integrity and transparency. While not directly accepting a bribe, this omission creates a conflict of interest and a perception of impropriety. It violates the duty of loyalty to the Academy and its stakeholders, who expect decisions to be made impartially and in the best interest of the institution. This approach fails to address the potential for undue influence and can still lead to reputational damage and a loss of confidence. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the relevant legal framework and ethical codes. Professionals should first identify the potential conflict of interest and the ethical implications of the situation. They should then consult internal policies and relevant legislation to determine the appropriate course of action. This typically involves immediate disclosure of the situation to a supervisor or designated ethics officer, and recusal from any decision-making processes that could be influenced by the offer. Maintaining detailed records of all communications and actions taken is also crucial for accountability. Question 15. Operational review demonstrates that a foreign trade partner, crucial for securing a significant export contract, has subtly suggested that a facilitation payment to a mid-level official in the importing country would significantly expedite the customs clearance process, implying this is a common practice in that region. The contract is vital for the Academy's affiliated foreign trade enterprises' annual targets. Option A. Immediately inform your direct supervisor and the legal department about the foreign partner's suggestion, requesting clear guidance on how to proceed in strict accordance with Russian foreign trade laws and the Academy's ethical guidelines, while ensuring all communication is documented. Option B. Advise the foreign partner that, while direct payments are not permissible, you can explore consulting fees for a third-party intermediary that you know can influence the official without disclosing this to your supervisor or legal department. Option C. Directly contact the foreign partner to explain that such payments are unacceptable and to request they find an alternative legal method for expediting customs clearance without involving superiors or legal counsel. Option D. Ignore the foreign partner's suggestion and proceed with the standard customs clearance procedures, hoping the issue resolves itself without any direct engagement or reporting. The correct answer is A. Immediately inform your direct supervisor and the legal department about the foreign partner's suggestion, requesting clear guidance on how to proceed in strict accordance with Russian foreign trade laws and the Academy's ethical guidelines, while ensuring all communication is documented. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the potential conflict between achieving organizational objectives and upholding ethical standards within the framework of Russian foreign trade regulations. The core dilemma lies in balancing the pressure to secure a significant contract with the imperative to avoid any actions that could be construed as unethical or non-compliant with the principles governing international trade and the specific requirements of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade Entrance exam. The need for careful judgment arises from the ambiguity of the situation and the potential for misinterpretation of actions, which could have severe reputational and legal consequences for both the individual and the organization. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and adherence to established ethical guidelines and regulatory frameworks. This means prioritizing integrity over expediency by seeking clarification from superiors and ensuring all actions are documented and align with the spirit and letter of Russian foreign trade laws and the Academy's entrance exam guidelines. The individual demonstrates a professional commitment to ethical conduct. This approach is justified by the overarching principle of lawful and ethical business practice, which is fundamental to maintaining trust and credibility in international commerce, and is implicitly expected in the context of an academic institution focused on foreign trade. The Academy's entrance exam, by its nature, assesses not only knowledge, but also the candidate's understanding of professional responsibility. An incorrect approach of directly engaging with the foreign partner to smooth things over without proper authorization or adherence to internal protocols is ethically flawed. This could be interpreted as an attempt to circumvent established procedures, potentially leading to undisclosed benefits or commitments that violate Russian foreign trade regulations or the principles of fair competition. Such an action risks creating a perception of impropriety, even if no explicit wrongdoing occurred, and undermines the integrity of the decision-making process. Another incorrect approach of ignoring the situation and hoping it resolves itself is professionally negligent. This passive stance fails to address a potential ethical breach or regulatory noncompliance, leaving the organization vulnerable to future complications. It demonstrates a lack of proactive problem-solving and an abdication of professional responsibility, which is antithetical to the rigorous standards expected in foreign trade and by the Academy. A third incorrect approach of immediately reporting the situation to external regulatory bodies without first exhausting internal channels for clarification and resolution is also problematic. While whistleblowing is a critical mechanism, premature external reporting can be disruptive and may indicate a lack of trust in internal governance structures. It bypasses the opportunity for internal dialogue and correction, which is often the preferred first step in addressing potential issues within an organization, provided those internal processes are themselves ethical and compliant. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the facts and the potential ethical and regulatory implications. Second, consult internal policies, codes of conduct, and relevant legal frameworks. Third, seek guidance from superiors or designated ethics officers. Fourth, document all communications and decisions. Finally, act with integrity and transparency, ensuring all actions are defensible and align with the highest professional standards and regulatory requirements. Question 16. Stakeholder feedback indicates a pattern of potential irregularities in the grading of certain entrance exam papers, raising concerns about fairness and adherence to examination protocols. The Academy is facing pressure to meet its enrollment targets for the upcoming academic year. Option A. Disregard the feedback as potentially biased or an attempt to undermine the admissions process, focusing solely on meeting enrollment targets through existing channels. Option B. Immediately implement stricter grading controls and regrade all papers from the relevant cohort without a preliminary investigation, citing the need to address potential issues proactively. Option C. Communicate to the stakeholders that the feedback is being considered but take no immediate action, deferring any review until after the enrollment period has concluded. Option D. Initiate a comprehensive and impartial review of the flagged exam papers and grading procedures, involving independent evaluators if necessary, to ascertain the validity of the feedback and ensure compliance with all relevant examination regulations and internal policies. Correct answer is D. Initiate a comprehensive and impartial review of the flagged exam papers and grading procedures, involving independent evaluators if necessary, to ascertain the validity of the feedback and ensure compliance with all relevant examination regulations and internal policies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate financial interests of the academy and the long-term ethical obligations to its students and the integrity of its admissions process. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay legitimate concerns, which is professionally perilous. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional goals with ethical responsibilities. The correct approach involves a thorough, impartial investigation of the allegations, prioritizing the integrity of the admissions process and the fairness to all applicants. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of transparency, fairness, and accountability expected of educational institutions. Specifically, within the context of Russian Academy for Foreign Trade entrance exams, adherence to the established examination regulations and internal university policies governing admissions is paramount. These regulations are designed to ensure a meritocratic and equitable selection process. Any deviation that compromises this process, even if driven by perceived institutional benefit, would violate these foundational principles and potentially lead to legal challenges and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that involves dismissing the feedback without a proper review fails to uphold the duty of care owed to prospective students and undermines the credibility of the academy. This would be a direct violation of the principles of due process and fairness inherent in any examination system. Another incorrect approach, which is to immediately implement punitive measures without a thorough investigation, is equally problematic. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and could unfairly penalize individuals or departments, leading to internal discord and potential legal repercussions for wrongful accusations. A third incorrect approach, which is to attempt to suppress the feedback to avoid negative publicity, is a severe ethical and potentially legal failing. This demonstrates a lack of transparency and a disregard for the principles of good governance and accountability, which are crucial for maintaining trust with stakeholders. Professionals in such situations should employ a structured decision-making framework. This begins with acknowledging and documenting all feedback received. Next, an objective assessment of the credibility and nature of the feedback is necessary. This should be followed by initiating a formal, impartial investigation in accordance with the Academy's established procedures and relevant regulations. Throughout this process, maintaining confidentiality and ensuring fairness to all parties involved are critical. The ultimate decision should be based on the findings of the investigation and guided by the principles of ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. Question 17. Governance review demonstrates that a junior admissions officer has identified potential discrepancies in an applicant's academic transcripts and language proficiency certificates, raising concerns about possible falsification. The Academy is facing pressure to meet its enrollment targets for the upcoming academic year, and the senior admissions manager has indicated that admitting this applicant would significantly contribute to achieving those targets. The junior officer is unsure how to proceed, given the conflicting pressures. Option A suggests that the junior officer subtly adjust the interpretation of the submitted documents to align with the Academy's minimum requirements, thereby facilitating the applicant's admission. Option B escalate the concerns to the admissions committee for a formal investigation and decision, ensuring all documentation is presented accurately and without bias. Option C. Instruct the junior officer to directly contact the applicant to discuss the suspected falsifications and request additional documentation without involving the admissions committee. Option D. Advise the junior officer to overlook the minor discrepancies, emphasizing the importance of meeting enrollment targets and the potential positive impact of admitting this applicant. The correct answer is B. Escalate the concerns to the admissions committee for a formal investigation and decision, ensuring all documentation is presented accurately and without bias. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate financial interests of the academy and the long-term ethical obligations to its students and the integrity of its admissions process. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can tempt individuals to overlook or downplay irregularities, creating a significant ethical dilemma. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional goals with the paramount importance of fairness and adherence to established regulations. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to the established admission regulations of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade. This means meticulously verifying all submitted documents, including academic transcripts and language proficiency certificates, against the Academy's stated requirements. If discrepancies or potential falsifications are identified, the appropriate procedure is to escalate these findings to the admissions committee or designated oversight body for a thorough investigation, rather than attempting to resolve them informally or overlooking them. This upholds the principle of meritocracy and ensures that all applicants are evaluated on a level playing field, in accordance with the Academy's internal policies and any relevant federal educational guidelines governing admissions in the Russian Federation. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the concerns raised by the junior admissions officer due to pressure from senior management to meet enrollment targets. This action would violate the ethical duty to ensure the integrity of the admissions process and could lead to the admission of unqualified candidates, thereby undermining the Academy's reputation and the value of its degrees. It also fails to comply with the implicit or explicit regulatory requirement for due diligence in admissions. Another incorrect approach would be to directly confront the applicant with the suspected falsification without a formal investigation or proper procedure. This could lead to legal complications, damage the Academy's reputation, and bypass the established internal processes designed to handle such sensitive matters fairly and systematically. It also fails to provide the applicant with due process. A third incorrect approach would be to instruct the junior officer to look the other way, or to find ways to bend the rules to accommodate the applicant. This constitutes a direct breach of ethical conduct and potentially regulatory compliance, as it actively encourages the circumvention of established admission criteria. It prioritizes expediency and target achievement over fairness and integrity. The professional decision-making process in such situation should involve a clear understanding of the Academy's code of conduct, admissions policies, and relevant Russian educational laws. When faced with a potential ethical conflict, professionals should 1. Identify the core ethical principles at stake, e.g., fairness, integrity, transparency. 2. Consult relevant policies and regulations. 3. Document all observations and concerns meticulously. 4. Escalate the issue through the appropriate internal channels for investigation and decision-making, rather than attempting to resolve it unilaterally or under pressure. 5. Maintain objectivity and avoid personal biases or external pressures. Question 18. Governance review demonstrates that a senior administrator at the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade has a close relative applying for admission. The administrator is aware that the relative's application is not as strong as some other candidates. The administrator is considering ways to ensure their relative gains admission, believing it would be beneficial for the family and potentially enhance the Academy's connections. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the administrator to take? Option A. Discreetly inform the admissions committee of the familial relationship and express a personal hope that the relative will be considered favorably, while emphasizing that the final decision rests with the committee. Option B. Immediately recuse themselves from any involvement in the admissions process for this application cycle and ensure no communication regarding the relative's application is made through them. Option C. Privately meet with the admissions committee members to highlight the relative's strengths and subtly suggest that admitting them would be advantageous for the Academy's future networking opportunities. Option D. Advise the relative on how to strengthen their application by exaggerating certain achievements and experiences, ensuring they meet the minimum requirements. The correct answer is A. Discreetly inform the admissions committee of the familial relationship and express a personal hope that the relative will be considered favorably, while emphasizing that the final decision rests with the committee. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate financial interests of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade and the long-term ethical obligations to uphold academic integrity and fair competition. The decision-maker must navigate the potential for personal gain against the principles of transparency and impartiality expected in an academic admissions process. Careful judgment is required to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, which could damage the Academy's reputation and violate established admission guidelines. The correct approach involves a transparent and documented refusal to engage in any preferential treatment based on the familial relationship. This upholds the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants and adheres to the spirit and letter of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade's admission regulations, which are designed to ensure merit-based selection. By strictly following the established admission criteria and processes, the decision-maker avoids any conflict of interest and maintains the integrity of the admissions process. This aligns with ethical codes that prioritize fairness, impartiality, and the avoidance of undue influence. An incorrect approach would be to subtly influence the admissions committee to favor the relative, even without explicit instruction. This creates an appearance of bias and undermines the fairness of the process. It violates the ethical duty of impartiality and could be seen as a breach of trust by other applicants and the wider academic community. Such an action, even if not directly violating a specific written rule, contravenes the underlying principles of fair competition and meritocracy that govern academic admissions. Another incorrect approach would be to directly disclose the familial relationship to the admissions committee and request special consideration. While seemingly transparent, this still introduces an inappropriate element into the decision-making process. The admissions committee is tasked with evaluating candidates based on objective criteria, not personal connections. Requesting special consideration, even with disclosure, puts undue pressure on the committee and compromises their ability to make an impartial decision, thereby violating the Academy's commitment to a merit-based system. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Identifying the potential conflict of interest. 2. Consulting the relevant internal regulations and ethical guidelines of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade concerning admissions and conflicts of interest. 3. Prioritizing adherence to these regulations and ethical principles above personal relationships or potential benefits. 4. Documenting all interactions and decisions related to the situation to ensure transparency and accountability. 5. Seeking guidance from a supervisor or ethics committee if the situation is complex or unclear. Question 19. The assessment process reveals that Proctor, while monitoring the entrance examination for the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade, observes a candidate discreetly using a small, pre-written note that appears to contain answers to specific questions on the exam paper. The proctor is certain of what they saw. What is the most ethically and procedurally sound course of action for the proctor? Option A. Discreetly inform a fellow proctor or a trusted colleague about the observation to get their opinion before taking any action. Option B. Continue to monitor the candidate closely but allow them to finish the exam, planning to report the observation to the examination committee later without immediate intervention. Option C. Immediately and discreetly confiscate the note and the candidate's examination paper and escort the candidate out of the examination hall, reporting the incident to the examination committee. Option D. Make a mental note of the candidate's behavior and address it with the candidate privately after the examination concludes to understand the situation. The correct answer is C. Immediately and discreetly confiscate the note and the candidate's examination paper and escort the candidate out of the examination hall, reporting the incident to the examination committee. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation of maintaining academic integrity and fairness within the context of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade entrance exam. The dilemma arises from a candidate's potential unfair advantage due to access to confidential information, which directly conflicts with the principles of equal opportunity and merit-based selection that underpin such examinations. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for a rigorous assessment with the imperative to uphold ethical standards and the reputation of the Academy. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the suspected breach of examination integrity to the appropriate examination committee or designated authority within the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade. This action is justified by the fundamental ethical principle of honesty and the regulatory framework governing entrance examinations, which mandates the prevention of cheating and the assurance of a fair testing environment. Specifically, Russian educational legislation and internal regulations of the academy would likely stipulate procedures for handling suspected academic misconduct, emphasizing the duty of all involved parties, including examiners and administrative staff, to report any observed irregularities. This ensures that the integrity of the admission process is preserved, and all candidates are evaluated on their own merits. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observation, assuming it might be a misunderstanding or not significant enough to warrant action. This failure constitutes a breach of professional duty and ethical responsibility, as it implicitly condones potential academic dishonesty and undermines the fairness of the examination. Such inaction could lead to an unqualified candidate being admitted, thereby compromising the academic standards of the academy and potentially disadvantaging deserving candidates. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the candidate directly or attempt to investigate the matter independently, without involving the official examination authorities. This could lead to an escalation of the situation, potential accusations of bias or harassment, and could compromise any subsequent official investigation by interfering with evidence or procedures. It also bypasses the established protocols for handling such serious matters, which are designed to ensure impartiality and due process. A further incorrect approach would be to discuss the observation with other candidates or staff members who are not directly involved in the examination oversight. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and could create an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust among candidates, negatively impacting the examination environment. It also risks spreading unsubstantiated rumors and could prejudice the official investigation. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the academy's ethical code and examination regulations. When faced with a potential breach of integrity, the professional should 1. Observe and document the suspected irregularity objectively. 2. Immediately report the observation to the designated authority or examination committee, providing all relevant details. 3. Cooperate fully with any subsequent investigation. 4. Maintain strict confidentiality regarding the matter until it is officially resolved. This systematic approach ensures that ethical obligations are met, regulatory requirements are adhered to, and the integrity of the examination process is protected. Question 20. The efficiency study reveals that candidates from certain preparatory courses consistently achieve higher scores on the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade entrance exam, particularly in the economics and international law sections, raising concerns about potential systemic advantages. Which approach best addresses this finding while upholding the integrity of the entrance examination process according to the Academy's regulatory framework? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the preparatory course's curricula and teaching methodologies in relation to the exam's content and assessment criteria, and review the exam scoring rubric for potential biases, while also investigating the Academy's internal guidelines for recognizing or accrediting preparatory programs. Option B. Immediately adjust the weighting of the economics and international law sections to reduce their influence on the overall score, assuming the preparatory courses are teaching to the test rather than fostering genuine understanding. Option C. Advise prospective students to avoid the identified preparatory courses, citing the study's findings as a warning about potential over-reliance on specific coaching methods. Option D. Disregard the study's findings as a reflection of candidate motivation and effort, and maintain the current exam structure without further investigation, as the Academy's primary focus is on assessing raw academic potential. Correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the preparatory course's curricula and teaching methodologies in relation to the exam's content and assessment criteria, and review the exam scoring rubric for potential biases, while also investigating the Academy's internal guidelines for recognizing or accrediting preparatory programs. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the pursuit of academic excellence and institutional reputation with the ethical imperative of academic integrity and fair assessment. The entrance exam for the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade is a critical gateway, and any perceived manipulation or unfair advantage undermines the credibility of the institution and the fairness of the selection process. The challenge lies in identifying and addressing potential biases or inefficiencies in the exam process, without compromising its validity or creating new forms of inequity. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based impact assessment that prioritizes fairness, transparency, and adherence to the established regulatory framework of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade's entrance examinations. This approach necessitates a systematic review of the exam's design, administration, and scoring to identify any factors that might disproportionately affect candidates' performance, irrespective of their actual knowledge or aptitude. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principles of equitable access to education and the commitment to selecting candidates based on merit, as implicitly or explicitly mandated by the Academy's internal regulations and the broader Russian educational standards governing entrance examinations. It ensures that any proposed changes are data-driven and aimed at improving the overall fairness and validity of the assessment process, thereby upholding the Academy's reputation and the trust of prospective students. An incorrect approach would be to implement changes based on anecdotal evidence or a superficial understanding of the efficiency study's findings. For instance, immediately altering the weighting of certain sections without a comprehensive analysis of the underlying reasons for performance disparities would be a regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to unintended consequences, such as penalizing candidates who possess strengths in areas that were previously undervalued or creating new biases. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the efficiency study's findings without proper investigation, which would be a failure to uphold the Academy's commitment to continuous improvement and potentially ignore systemic issues that could disadvantage future applicants. Furthermore, focusing solely on perceived ease or difficulty, without considering the alignment of exam content with the curriculum and learning objectives, would also be a flawed approach, as it deviates from the core purpose of assessing preparedness for specialized foreign trade studies. The professional decision-making process in such situation should involve a structured impact assessment framework. This framework typically includes defining the problem or observed phenomenon as revealed by the efficiency study, gathering and analyzing relevant data, exam performance, candidate demographics, feedback, identifying potential causes and impacts, evaluating alternative solutions against established criteria, fairness, validity, regulatory compliance, and implementing and monitoring the chosen solution. Professionals must always refer to the specific regulations and guidelines of the Russian Academy for Foreign Trade for entrance examinations to ensure all actions are compliant and ethically sound.